Hello and welcome everyone to our MPM Skills 101 monthly webcast series. My name is Eric Desmond from the Global Customer Success Team, and I will be your moderator today. Today's presenters are Jeff Shahan and Chris Shallcross. The material covered today will include anatomy of a tenant-to-tenant migration. This session will last 30 to 45 minutes. It will be recorded, and we will be sending everyone on the registration list a link to the recording within 48 hours for future use. Feel free to ask your questions through the chat so they can be addressed by Jeff and Chris from our Quest team. And with that, I will hand this webcast over to you, Jeff and Chris. Thank you.
Greetings, I'm Jeff Shahan. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect with Quest and their migration solutions. So I'm going to talk about tenant-to-tenant migration, kind of give you an overview of how that would play out with our tools. For the agenda today, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the on-demand platform, some security considerations around our migration tool, how to delegate access within our migration tool and within the platform generally, how to create the on-demand project, and then what the workload migration process looks like, including in-user switching. First, the on-demand platform. So on-demand is our SaaS platform that we have management, migration, backup and restore, and audit tools in. The migration tool is what I'll be focusing in on today. So on-demand migration can migrate all the major workloads. It is a SaaS platform. We have additional modules that I won't be talking about today. We have a module that can move the domain from one tenant to the other, including stamping the addresses where it needs to go. We have a directory sync component that can connect to both tenants and on-prem and synchronize the objects, as well as an address rewrite system. So you can share a domain between both tenants that you currently can't move directly into the tenant. Next, the security considerations. So migration tools need a lot of access to both tenants to do what they are. They are automated administrative tools, so over and above administrative access is needed in order to migrate content into those environments. If you're leveraging conditional access policies, you need to consider that this is a SaaS platform in Azure's environment, so we can come from a wide variety of IP addresses. We use a serverless architecture, which means we could be coming from a different IP address as we scale the platform out. We also have an activity trail, so we can say who did what when within the platform. So as you delegate the tool, if something happens and you need to figure out who did it, when it was done, you can look in the activity trail, and I'll kind of show you that as well. And then subscription sharing. So on-demand migration is sold as a subscription. So the license is sold to Bob at company. If somebody else needs to use that license, say a partner or an engineer, Bob can share those licenses, and we'll show you how to request that. So we use service principals, so we need to grant consent into the tenants. We recommend that you use a dedicated account for this task. In other words, don't use somebody else's global administrative account in order to do it. Create one for it. The reason for this, there are a few sections in the tool where we use delegated access, which means we are actually that account doing that task. Namely, this happens within teams. We make this account the owner of the team in order to handle the migration of those private channels. We recommend that you create it with an obvious name, so when somebody sees it, they are not concerned with what is going on with that account. It also needs to be licensed for the workloads that we're migrating, so Mail, Teams, and SharePoint. This is a view of the tenant consent pane. So once I've added a tenant, if I click on the Add Tenant, it will pop up with a modern authentication dialog box. You present those global admin credentials, and as soon as you've done that, you have this first entry. This is the on-demand consent. After that, you have to grant 4 additional consents for the migration tool itself. We do leverage different parts of the tool. So teams will leverage the SharePoint part and also leverage the mailbox migration part, as well as basic. What that looks like for an enterprise application is what you see below. If you were to look at these, you could see the permissions. You can also see what permissions we're asking back on those consent screens. There's a little link in order to see that. We try to make it really obvious on what consent we're asking for. We are using related graphed APIs for the different workloads. So if you go to the settings activity trail, you can kind of see who did what when. So I grabbed a shot of when I was doing something in my organization, and I can see I created a new migration project. You move to settings and subscriptions. This shows you what licensing you have. Because I'm a Quest internal employee, I have a permanent demo license in order to be able to work with the tool. Anybody else would have a license with a number for the product and the date at which it's going to expire. When we consume licenses, we consume the oldest subscription license first. So if you had 2 licenses, one expiring in July and one in December, we will consume all of the July licenses before we move to the December licenses. So if you click on that shared subscription link, you see this page presented here. All you need to do is type in the user that has that license and click request. He gets an email. He just has to acknowledge that email, and the platform will grant you access to his licenses. Now I'm going to talk about on-demand delegation. Because I talked about using a global administrator account, a lot of customers don't like to hand those out to partners or who's ever doing the migration. So we recommend that since you're using that, you can use delegation in order to let somebody they trust with that account to do those consents for you. So that's what I'm talking about, the limited access to the source and tenant to lock down who can do discovery tasks or who can grant the consents. You may want to divide how you're doing your migration. You may have a team that does Teams. You may have another team that does OneDrive and another team that does mail. You can divide it down to the task level, not just the module level. We support Azure authentication. So just sending it to your email address, all you need to do is log into the platform for the very first time, and we will dynamically create an account and you will already have access if you're giving it to somebody who's never used the tool. I talked about it being task level or module level. This is the overall workflow for that. You go to the delegation, create the role, permissions, and assign the user access. Here's what that looks like. These are the built-in roles that exist, kind of an overall admin role or module level admins. Click create a role. You can pick out what you want to do. I've selected the on-demand organization, just can add and remove tenants. That gives them the right to grant consents. And then I just need to add somebody into that role. And it's that simple. Then when they log into this platform, they have access into your organization and can then add and remove tenants, but nothing else. So to create a migration project, you have to have 2 tenants registered. All 5 consents should be granted. And you should consider how you're going to use our desktop update agent. It can be leveraged 2 ways, either a pre-deployed utility where you download the MSI and you push it out, or just in time. And I'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation. Also, reading the documentation would be a great start. So here's the workflow for creating a project. First, register the 2 tenants, create the project, decide whether you're going to deploy the desktop update utility. If you are, download it and move into the desktop deployment process. Now that your project's created, you would move into the account process. So everything within the migration is the foundation is the account migration. This is where you migrate all of the accounts or match and merge to existing accounts. Most of our customers are hybrid. They're using Azure AD Connect to populate their directory. This is very common. So we do have a way for you to match, and they can be dissimilar accounts. OneDrive migration can run concurrently with email. We don't recommend that you try to run OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. It is all SharePoint. It could cause throttling and slow everything down. So kind of work together to how hard you're going to hammer SharePoint. This is what the overall migration project looks like. Create the project, process the accounts, and then move into the single user workload processes. So Mail and OneDrive being a single user process. And then move into the SharePoint and Teams or the multi-user process. I have seen several customers switch the users, Mailbox and OneDrive, use the web interface to access Team and SharePoint using the source account to still maintain that access until they're ready to migrate their teams. So discovery is the first part that you need to do. This is how we know what accounts that we can work with. This imports those accounts and information about those accounts into our user interface. If you plan to have a limited view of those accounts, by default, if you run a discovery task, we will see every user and group in the source tenant. If that's something you don't want to do, you can create a CSV. So this would be something with object IDs or UPNs as a CSV file. And you can import that. We can lock it down to only one person being able to do that discovery task, so somebody else couldn't do different types of discovery tasks. If the tenant is hybrid, in other words, Azure AD Connect, we do have a task that you need to execute. You need to migrate the source legacy Exchange DN as an X500 proxy address into those target objects. It is unwritable for us into the directory. If it was a cloud-born object, we would be able to write it and you wouldn't have to consider it. So here's the workflow of the overall account migration project. The left half is how are you going to handle discovery, whether you're going to limit it or run a full discovery, and how you're going to do that. We also support using a security group and a conditional application access policy. So that would limit only members of that group can we actually migrate those mailboxes for. Then we move to the right-hand side of the screen, and whether it's hybrid or cloud, and that drives the task. We do also have a SaaS-based Active Directory migration tool that could take care of writing those X500 addresses, as I spoke to earlier. Next, the mail migration process. So we recommend that you create batches, no more than 100 users in a batch. The concept we use within the tool is considered a collection. So you can create a limited view of users to do that in. We recommend that you migrate the older content first before you migrate the newer content. So the reason for this, we are a copy technology. Anything that we copy today and doesn't exist tomorrow will still exist in the target mailbox. So if you migrate 90 days or older, you get the weight of the mailbox done, the thing that's going to take the longest. And then the second pass when you're ready to switch those users over, 90 days or newer. And then move to the switching of those desktop applications. This would be changing and reconfiguring Microsoft Outlook. We also have an optional Teams meeting link migration. So in other words, we will rewrite new meeting links for every team meeting in that mailbox that mailbox was the organizer for. Next, the OneDrive migration process. We only need a security principal in the account. Actually, yeah, it's an account principal in the account. So account and password. It would have to be a SharePoint administrator to be able to pre-provision those SharePoint drives or the OneDrives. So if you want to manually do that, we recommend that you do that at the beginning of this. The tool itself will do it if you've given it that authority to do it with that account. We will do it, and then we will wait for them to come, and then we'll start migrating them. We recommend that you don't migrate permissions until the last pass. There's no sense in going through all of that effort if you're going to do it again. We do recommend that you don't migrate all of the versions. And then you can use the desktop application to reconfigure the OneDrive synchronization tool. Next, the SharePoint process. So you need to configure the SharePoint to have the admin URLs for both and a default admin account or a default account for any permission that we can't assign. And then you start your process. You can discover by CSV or by a discovery task. We allow you to run a matching task or map from a file or map and rename. So you have some control about how you dissect your SharePoint sites and how you rename them as you migrate them. We do allow you to show deeper levels of content and migrate from those lower levels in the tree. So you do have some control. Again, I've shown 2 migration tasks, one to get the bulk of it over and the last one to get the delta before you finish that process. Next, the Teams migration process. Same discover from a CSV or just a task. We allow you to map and rename these if you need to. We do also support multi-geos. So if you were a multi-geo tenant, you could specify which geo you wanted to put all of these different sites in. We recommend that you run a provisioning task and then wait 24 hours. It does take a while for new teams to become provisioned. That's why we recommend 24 hours. If you were to run too quickly, the task may not complete properly, and then you would have to go through and run the migration task again, because some content can't go in a folder that wasn't yet created. We also migrate Teams chats. So this is the one-to-one chat, the chat between you and me. We have a discovery task. We only discover chats for mapped users, so we won't find the chats for the CEO that you aren't migrating, but we will find the chats for everybody that you are migrating. You can then select the user that you want to migrate, and then the number of days back. By default, the Teams module is licensed with 15 and 30 days worth of historical chats. There is an additional license if you want to get all of the chats, and that gives you an option of 15, 30, 60, 90, and indefinite, as well as migrating them into archive, which creates a HTML file with all of the chat information that is latched into the Teams client. I'm going to move on to in-user switching. So the in-user switching can happen during or after hours. That's completely up to you when you want to do that. It is something the user needs to interact with. So you could execute the task, but until they've executed their part of the task, it won't be complete. We do report on whether it has been done by the end user, so we are tracking that for you. The single user workload should be migrated first. We talked about that earlier. SharePoint and Teams can be accessed via the web clients. End user switching can happen whenever. We do require that you communicate with those users, kind of let them know that it's coming before they get this email in their email box. This is the deployment. So if you're going to pre-deploy the agent and you ask, why would I pre-deploy the agent? This gives me the ability to update the licensing for Office, the application, so I can take those credentials out so they have to reassign it with their new credential. If you're going to do a direct download, then there's really no setup to do. You don't need to push the utility out. This is the admin process. This is the piece that you do from the back end. You select the users you want it to do. You create an application switch task, tell it how you've delivered the application to it, what applications you're going to update, where you want to place that email. So you can place it in the source or target mailbox. So if you've already migrated the users and processed Outlook but haven't done anything else, this is a way to let them know that this needs to happen again. And then you schedule and run that task, and that process is complete. Then the end user starts his process. He receives the notification email, tells him kind of what he needs to do. Depending on what your application delivery method was, will dictate what they do next. When they launch it, they will be prompted for their target password. We will then reconfigure Outlook. Next, we will reconfigure the Office application. Then the OneDrive sync and Teams client update. If you've decided not to do any of those, they're just grayed out. And it's time for Q&A. Chris?
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put your questions into the chat and we will answer them as best we can straight away. So admit your questions through the chat because we can't take everyone off of mute.
Okay, we have a question here about mobile device switching. The question is, can it do mobile device switching also? You know, it's as far as that goes, in an automated fashion, switching over a mobile device, no, the tool will not do that natively. Okay. If there's any further questions, please feel free to put them into the meeting chat. We'll go ahead and move. Okay, there's not one here. Can you use the desktop update agent to migrate Outlook or Teams or Office individually, or do you have to migrate all at once? The answer to that is that you can do them individually. So I will actually put a link into the meeting chat here of the user guide for the desktop update agent. But long story short, it does allow you to go in and initiate a change of all the users' Outlook clients, and then you can follow that up a day later, a week later, or whatever the case may be, and do their Teams client or their Office local apps, etc. So no, you do not have to do it all at once. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass this back on over to you, Eric.
Thanks, Chris. So thank you everyone for joining today's session, and thank you to our presenters, Jeff and Chris.